All right, so welcome everybody. I'm the Collector. This is the Collector's Judgment video cast episode 2. I have a friend of mine with me here today. He is a member of Team Nemesis, which is the magic team of the source. So,
Hi, my name is Bailey Russell. A lot of the guys here know me. I'm happy to be on the video cast. Jordan invited me. We're going to dive deep into Modern today, talk about Modern's current state and the ban list of Modern, and we'll get right into that. It's going to be great.
yep. Well, let's get to it. All right, we're going to start talking about the current game state of Modern. We're kind of going to go through each of the main headings of them: aggro, control, combo. Um, so we'll kind of go through that, and then we're going to have a little discussion about the Modern ban list. Which I know there's a lot of hot and heavy discussion being had at home tables as well on that. So I know for sure there's a whole lot happening here. But we'll go ahead and get started. We'll I guess probably best place to start be aggro. So we can kind of get going in there. There's a fistful of strategies that are going on in there. So I guess we'll get started. What do you want
to? So moving into Modern's current state, there's a lot of different strategies that we're seeing, but a lot of the same cards in all those strategies. You know, cards like Ragavan Nimble Pilfer, cards like Lurrus, cards like Dragon Rage Channeler, Prismatic Ending.
Right.
A lot of Modern Horizons 2 shifted the meta back in July whenever that came out.
Right. Well, and I mean, just as a general rule, like Modern Horizons, and then especially Modern Horizons 2 has just kind of exploded that, the modern meta anyway. So, yeah. But Modern Horizons 2, my lord, it's got all kinds of.
So shortly after Modern Horizons 2, people started trying out Stoneblade because Stoneblade was a very hot deck even before MH2 came out.
Right.
So people saw Cauldron Complete and they're like, that's going to be a really problematic card because they thought it was going to replace Batterskull, but then people found that you can just play both of them and you can either play passive or you can play aggressive. Yep. So that at the start of MH2's release, people played those decks and they kind of shifted away from the companion being Lurrus. Even though those decks weren't playing Lurrus to begin with, Stoneblade kind of took over there for a second, and you saw Red Deck win still at the top of the format with Obosh. A lot of decks were just trying out, new things. MH2 took a while to settle in, and now here we are in February, and it came out in July. We're not far off from a year.
Yeah.
And MH2 is still very prevalent in the meta, and I don't think it's going to shift anytime soon. So long as companions are still a thing, MH2 is going to continue to be a very dominant set because those cards synergize well with the companions.
Right.
And the three big companions, for those who don't know, are Yorion, Kahira, and Lurrus. Yorion and Lurrus are the two biggest ones. Kahira is kind of off to the side with elementals and control. But Yorion, being 80 card, it's resistant to mill. Lurrus, it's got the graveyard strategy. It can play aggressive and play passive, which is why a deck like Gracious Death Shadow is at the top of the metagame in aggro. It's showing 9% of the meta approximately, and all this comes from the MTG top 8 page. So if you don't believe me, you can go check it out. These are the correct percentages based off of last night. So 9% of the meta is Gracious Death Shadow. The reason why those decks are at the top is because they're playing cards like Ragavan Nimble Pilfer, Dragon's Rage Channeler. You're playing Death Shadow, which has been a staple for a long time since World Wake.
Yeah, and bounces in and out and in and out and in and out. They come out with something new.
But the reason why it's at the top and why it's so resistant is because it's playing the cards like Counterspell, it's playing Crown of the Lock, it's playing Archmage's Charm. You can play a counter deck that can also be aggressive.
Right.
And that's really problematic. Yeah. Whenever you can stay the long game and play against a control deck and match the counter magic, but then have larger creatures, that's a problem.
Yes.
And especially whenever you have a maxed out Death Shadow with Dressdown on the field.
Right.
That deck has solid answers to the Evoke Elementals. It has solid answers to 4-color creativity with Sarah's Emissary. It has answers to Emrakul the Aeon's Torn and Art of Cruelty. Whenever they put that on the field, before they go to combat with Emrakul, in response, Dress Down.
Yeah.
Take 15, not the end of the world. You can still come back and win from that.
Sure.
But the Annihilator 6 trigger is a problem.
It is massive.
So
Right.
to
right.
dress down and just make it a vanilla 15/15 that you can block, it no longer has flying. It loses
Right.
all abilities.
Right.
And it's just a vanilla 15/15.
Yep.
That deck can go the long game and it can easily keep up, which is why
Right.
it's at the top. It has taken over the meta. It's arguably the top deck right above Hammer.
Right.
That, Hammer, and 4-color Control are going to be the top 3 decks that we're going to talk about. But right now we're in aggro, so we're focusing on Shadow and why it's still at the top.
What do you think is making it? I would arguably almost say that dress down is probably the most helpful thing to that. I know with adding in counterspell that helps, but dress down
you
being
gotta,
able to
you got to
drop that thing out, be able to knock it, make it a 13/13, immediately.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
that's really rough.
the same is to be said with Infect, and one of the cards that was on the ban list that I'm, very iffy on is Blazing Shoal. And, the instant speed, like forever ago, it was exile version this from hand, give it Listener Elf,
Right.
+10/+0.
That's right.
And kill them.
Right. Right.
That's Infect.
Right.
But whenever you're playing fetch lands and you're shocking and, doing that multiple turns, and Modern's a turn 3, turn 4 format anyway.
Right.
If you can just max out a Death Shadow by getting yourself to 12, going to combat, they have nothing on the field. Like, if somebody's playing Tron, hypothetically they're playing Tron.
Right.
And you have a 1/1 Shadow, and you've already dealt, a little bit of damage to him with Ragavan,
Right.
got stuff off the top, you got the treasures, you are just absolutely dominating them in every way, shape, or form.
Right.
If you just slap a dress down on the field and you're hitting them for 13,
Right.
that's going to be a problem. And not a lot of
Sure.
people can come back from that. Like,
No.
you can't, because once the Shadow has hit you and you're so low, they're still playing bolts.
Exactly.
They're still playing Unholy Heats. And now they have the counter magic to stop you from doing what you were supposed to do.
Right.
So you have to have the answer to the threat and the counter magic once they have slapped the dress down. And the thing that dress down does on top of that is you're drawing a card. So it's a cycle effect.
Right.
And it has flash. So at instant speed, you slap an enchantment, everything on the board loses what it's supposed to do.
Right.
So it is definitely a powerful card, but not something that they're running 4 of. It's maybe something that you'll see in the sideboard, and they might play 1 or 2 in the main.
Well, it's not the main strategy in it.
It's not.
Either.
It's just a side strategy.
It's just a side strategy, but
and that's why the deck it's so
super
versatile.
viable.
Yeah.
Side strategy.
So like just digging deep with with expressive iteration to plunder off your opponent with Ragavan and to just be aggressive at any time. That's why the deck has stayed on top, and it can consistently keep up with all the other decks and everything else that those decks are doing.
Right.
So whenever you're playing Hammer and you sit across from Grixis Death Shadow, you're gonna have a terrible time.
Yeah.
You just are.
Right.
Unless you just through and through draw better cards and know how to properly pilot Hammer, you're gonna have a problem.
Right.
That's just how it is.
Exactly.
But moving on from Shadow, we've got Burn or Red Deck wins, surprisingly sitting at 7% of the meta.
Which is almost scary.
It is. Burn is, we had this conversation last night on the phone.
Right.
It's not supposed to be at the top of the meta.
No.
It's really not. It's not.
Right.
It's just a deck that you see with a lot of stores slowly easing back into paper Magic.
Right.
A lot of people don't really want to pay for that subscription to Mana Traders or anything else. They don't want to put out $60 a month for a large subscription. So an easy thing that you can take into a challenge is Burn. It always has been. Same if you come to F&M, you win a couple of games, and you have a little bit of fun with it. And Burn really hasn't changed. Not much has changed. It's still Goblin Guide, Eidolon the Great Revel, Monastery Swiftspear, and a lot of the stuff that came out at least 7 years ago.
Right.
Very, very rarely are you going to see something be incorporated into Burn. Now, there is one card that has moved into Burn's sideboard. Actually, there's 2 cards. They're playing Luris. So to have them on, but you're not playing any permanent CMC 2 or more.
Right.
All your spells that they're CMC 2 or less anyway.
Right.
Whether they're spells or permanents, nothing's changed.
Right.
And their sideboard has changed over a period of time anyway, but it seems to be said with all the decks.
Right.
Whenever you sit across from Hammer and you have Deflecting Palm in your side, which is one of the cards, they try to hit you with with 10 damage off of a Hammer, and as a Burn player, you probably already got him down to 13, and you hit him for 10. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a problem. So
yeah. Well, and I mean, Burn Burn has always been pretty modest to be able to get in, let alone if you look at kind of where it was, say, 3 years ago. How much were guides? Guides were like 20, 25 a piece. What are they now?
Well, they were around there. Yeah, they're probably sitting about 3 or 4
$3.
piece. And the promos that came out,
Right.
those promos one with the star,
Yeah.
they look really great, but they're only
Yes.
$5.
Right.
So
So like a lot of your meaty pieces, the kind of that were in it have kind of come down to even if you decide that you're going to play Moon,
yeah,
you're going to run Blood Moon. Well, Blood Moon's down to like
Blood Moon's still
13,
consistently
$14.
spending about $15-$20, depending on the set.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're just trying to build it with the least flashy,
yeah,
I just want to throw together this so I can play in it. So, and of course, your mana base is pretty.
It's pretty simple.
low.
Inspiring Vantage, if you're playing
Yeah.
Boros, or if you're just playing Mono Red, you just play Mountains.
Right.
There's really no reason to play anything else. You play Sunbait Canyon, Fire Islet for some extra card draw.
Yeah.
But Boros, you're
But
playing
you're not
Inspiring
playing a ton of
Vantage,
fetches
Arab Mesa.
and stuff like that. You can if you would like, but I feel like it's still very functional to take into a local FNM.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is, and it probably always will be.
Yeah,
You can't
now you
imagine
spice it up a little bit to put it in, like put it up to the level of MTG top 8 to where you're playing big stuff. You can spice it up a little bit and throw a few more dollars at it, get your fetches, and kind of clean it up. But that's crazy that it is so close to top.
Yeah,
So close.
It's the
number one. It's
right above Blue Red Murktide, which is the next deck that we're going to dive into.
Yeah.
And the rest of these, since they're kind of lower percentages after Murktide, we're just going to kind of go over them a little bit.
Yeah.
Not very much. The big ones we want to dive deep into and explain why they're at the top.
Right.
Blue Red Murktide. It's kind of moved down a little bit. A lot of people were definitely heavy on Murktide for a while. Right. And I know people are definitely calling for Murktide to be banned because there's a flash mob of people that take a couple cards out of a set and they really don't like them, and whenever they just become very popular, people just instantly go to ban it.
Right. Instead of doing the work and looking at, okay, what do I need to do to kind of get control over this card, and that's when sideboards change and things like that. But there's always that flash rage mob that immediately, oh my god, that's miserable, ban it. I heard it on Solitude, I heard it on Braggervan, I heard it on Murktide.
And at one point I heard somebody compare it to Hogak, which is not even comparable. No. It's just not. No. To delve that out of the graveyard, it's probably more comparable to Treasure Cruiser Dixie Time, like the same strategy of exiling stuff from your yard, but it's a body. You're not drawing anything off of it. Right. It does have flying, and that's problematic. But as long as something like Solitude exists, it's never going to be that big of a problem. There's so many ways to deal with it. And with that, and you have Unholy Heave. So with Unholy Heave being printed,
that's right.
Normally if they get a 7/7 Murktide, it's going to kind of feel bad. But normally they're not going to put it over that. And if they do, you're really in the long game, and it's probably a top deck when you're both empty-handed.
Right. Exactly.
So, at that point, you just have to hope you draw something to beat it. But once you make it to that point in the game and you're on turn 11, anybody's deck can fire off. So if that's the point in the game where Murktide is starting to really become problematic, the game's probably over anyway, and there's nothing you can do. Unfortunately, you're in the hole.
Right.
So we've all been there. And it really sucks whenever you play against it, but man, it's part of the game. It just is, and it always has been. So, it sucks whenever, turn 10 happens and you get slapped with a Primeval Titan on the opposing side of the board. What are you going to do?
Well,
it is what it is. Right. But this deck is, very similar to Shadow in the sense that it's blue-red. It's not playing a companion because of Murktide being in the deck, but it doesn't need it.
Right.
It can very simply play the long game. It's probably more comparable to Blue-Red Prowess from over a year ago. Just, the blue-red is a mid-range version of a deck that has upgraded itself to play Expressive Iteration, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, Dragon's Rage Channeler, and Murktide Regent.
Yeah.
And with all those cards, that's the toolbox you need. And with Counterspell being printed, that's great. Right. And then the side, you don't have to worry about playing Alpine Moon whenever you're up against a Saga deck or Hammer or something like that. You want to screw your opponent, you just play a Blood Moon and you just fetch basics. Sure. And so, I like seeing, even after all these years, Blood Moon still being very prevalent in the meta. It's nice to see. Yeah. It keeps a lot of decks in check.
It's one of those super frustrating cards, but it's a check card.
It is. Really, it's one of those cards that just has to exist, and if it didn't, it would just be a problem. So I like seeing that in the sideboard. And Murktide is still placing consistently in the top 8. It hasn't gone away. It's just slowed down because people are picking up these more popular decks that have increased in the meta. whenever back in October, Grixis Death Shadow really hit the map like hard.
Right.
Because Corey Baumeister took it to the SCG Invitational,
That's
which was
right.
the Halloween thing
right.
for those who don't know in Roanoke, Virginia, and he
Yes.
placed first, and he got first at Grixis Death Shadow, and people saw the list and they're like, "That's good,
Right.
that's
Right.
good." And so he
Right,
really
right.
put it on the map. Now there were people that were playing it on MTGO, but for a long time before Grixis Shadow was a thing, Jund Shadow was the thing to do.
It was.
It was
Right.
like just for a long
Right.
time, Jund Shadow was the go-to deck for 4-color or 5-color Shadow.
Right.
But even like
Well,
even with
before
that,
Modern Horizons 2 came out, I was playing around a bit with Grixis Shadow 2 because Grixis doesn't get.
it doesn't, and
I
it's
love
nice to
love
see.
Grixis, so it is kind of, for me. It's fun to see.
It's nice to
Especially
see
Grixis Shadow.
Grixis really come to the top. And that with that being said, we're going to move on to Crashcade. Crashcade. If you're sitting across from your opponent and they don't reveal a companion, you can automatically assume that they're probably playing Crashcade because more than likely it's what they're going to be playing.
Sure.
Crashcade, Murktide, or Titan, or Tron. Those are the four that you can expect. Maybe Belcher. Belcher isn't as high up in the meta, but you still see it. Those are the decks that you could expect people to be playing if you don't see that kind of stuff. So just Cascade in general, I shouldn't say Crashcade, so that does include Living End. But Crashcade specifically in an aggro deck because Living is more of a combo, which I have on the list.
Right.
Right. Crashcade sitting at a solid 4%. So you see that play Violent Outburst, Chartless Agent, which got printed in MH2.
That's right. Yeah.
So now they have access to just playing green, red, and blue, and it's very consistent, and it's really annoying to play against. On your end step, they just cast a Violent Outburst, and now they have 8 power coming at you, and
Right.
that's a problem. It just
Right.
is. Sometimes they may cast a Violent Outburst to get 10 damage in if they need to kill you, and there's no blocks, and you're at 10 life. You're like, oh, I can survive. No, you
cannot.
So,
Right.
but yeah, that deck can certainly play the long game. It was really sitting at the top of the meta for a while after Hammer became big. It was right on top with Hammer before Grixis Shadow Arise back in October, and then after Grixis Shadow came up, that deck kind of went down because I guess people were more interested in like shifting to Grixis Shadow.
Sure.
Because the play style of Crashcade is really no different than Tron. You wait till turn 3.
Yes.
And then you go
and
off.
then you go.
And
right.
You have the Gemstone Caverns. And,
oh, good lord.
And then, turn 1, you play your land. Now you have ice. So on your opponent's second turn, you ice their land and they're still, down to 1 mana. Your third turn, let's cast a Chartless Agent. Let's get after it.
Right.
Right. So that's a problem. Not a lot of decks can keep up with that. It's really, really hard to contain those decks, especially with those Rhinos being out of Bolt range, which is why we've seen Bolt kind of shift down, and Fatal Push and Unholy Heat have become really good.
Yes.
And same with Prismatic Ending. Prismatic Ending is also a very solid answer.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving on from Crashcade, we've got Jund. Jund Saga specifically
around somewhere
for the boomers like our good friend Eric.
Yes.
He has made it work, and he has shifted his boomer mentality to play some more Zoomer style cards. But
right.
if you're still trying to slam boomer in a very competitive tournament, you cannot be butthurt if it doesn't work.
Sure.
Because all these new cards, the toolbox of them is just so much better and bigger and just allows you to do so many more things.
Right.
Ren and 6 with Urza Saga, just that loop is insane.
Oh my god.
It's really good.
It is.
If you have nothing else, I mean, I had an opening hand because I played Jund Saga myself. I had an opening hand of 5 lands, Ren and 6, and a Ragavan. And 2 of those lands were Urza Saga. And I won the game. So just being able to loop that and just, get Mistress Baubles, draw extra cards, and I have Luris, I can buy back Ragavan if it dies.
Right.
I can buy back Ren and 6 if it dies.
Right.
Luris is just really a good toolbox in that deck. So that's why Jund is sitting at 3% of the meta. It's just right below Crashcade on aggro. I think people kind of shifted away from Jund with Shadow being on top, and Hammer and 4-color control especially is what's keeping Jund at bay, because 4-color control is very, very difficult to play against in general. But
Right.
whenever you have a very linear strategy like Jund that's good with the 1-for-1 trades,
Right.
you're not getting the
Yeah,
1-for-1
no, you're
trade.
not getting
You're
the
just
trade.
not. If you set across from Yorion, you can assume it's 4-color control,
Sure.
and you're going to have a bad time.
Yes.
Unless they just have bad draws.
Right.
So right below Jund, we've got Rakdos, Spike, Aspiring Spike on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's part of Channel Fireball. He came up with the original Rakdos list after MH2, and it's just stuck around. It's just instead of green black rock, it's red black rock.
Right.
That's what we shifted to. You know,
Yep.
the days of Dark Confidant really are over unless you played in Hammer. And Goyf is just primarily in Jund, and Thoughtseize and Inquisition. They're in both of those decks. You know, they're good pieces, as we have talked about before.
Right.
That just belong in the game and keep a lot of things at bay.
And that's another conversation. Like, I'm not going to go too far off, but it's always sad to see kind of with the power creep that they've created currently. It's kind of taking those old staples that we love so much, like Bob and Dark Confidant, and like Goyf and things like that, and really just kind of made them almost moot.
Well, but
in fact, Liliana's kind of fallen off.
Yeah, Liliana has fallen off. Like decks like 8-rack, don't really exist anymore. They tried playing Urza Saga to fetch the rack. People don't really think about that, but it is something you can do.
It is doable.
But that kind of strategy is just so slow. Like
it's
with your opponent slapping a turn 1 Ragavan, if you don't have an answer and you're playing 8-rack, I'm sorry, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah, you're probably going to lose.
It's just the way it is. It is the turn 1 first impression, and they say first impressions are important.
They are.
If you set across from it. Yeah. If you sit across from an opponent and they play something like that and you don't answer it, their first impression was much better than yours. And you are just not going to have a good time.
Right. Exactly.
So aggro, those are the top 6 decks that we have for aggro. Do you have anything else you want to add for aggro before we move on?
No, I mean that pretty much covers it on that front. I mean we're talking generally about about kind of the big tournaments and things like that. I mean, there's always a few other Dursley things that you'll see kind of around the edges, but as far as that goes, that pretty much covers the big boys.
Well, moving on from aggro to control, there's really only 2 decks that are at the top.
Yeah.
I didn't include Tron because Tron was number 3. I only included the top 2. Tron is sitting at 2%. It's number 3 in the meta. For those that still love Tron, Tron's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Honestly, with everything else going on, I'm sure people will be perfectly fine with Tron being around because, turn 3 card almost seems fair.
It does.
That strategy, it's so annoying to play against once they get it together and you don't know what to do to stop it.
Sure.
But, man, all these other decks.
But we were just talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
so many things you can do. So many things you can do against it, and that's why people stopped playing it. Especially when Vindicate got printed, Tron was very afraid of that.
Yeah.
Vindicate was the card that Tron was really afraid of, especially since, like I said at the start, Orzhov Stoneblade was really hot, and people were playing Vindicate, and Tron was just not having a good time. People stopped playing it because they didn't want their Tron lands to get Vindicated, and to just, lose at a big tournament because they can't do anything about it. And, you just have to accept it for what it is. That's part of Tron. It's part of how it's been for a long time. But it's nice to see that. It's nice to see Tron still sitting at 2%. People are still diehard Tron fans, and they're still playing it. But number 2, no surprise, blue white control.
Blue white control, of course.
Just simple blue white control. Anything that you could think of that would be in blue white control is really still in it. Nothing has really changed, with the exception of Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas is a card that just kind of emerged. It's a common from Zendikar that nobody played except for Merfolk.
Right.
And whenever it came up, people thought, well, this card really isn't that great.
Right.
Well, believe me when I tell you it is.
Everything. Right.
The amount of game, we are both control players, as all the guys from the shop here know. We had 2 big events at the end of the year last year.
Yep.
And it was the store championship, and then there was the Team Nemesis 1K that Chris mentioned in the first episode.
Right.
Well, for those who don't know, as I said at the start, my name's Bailey. I won both of them with blue white control, and that's not a flex. Spreading Seas won those fucking games.
Yes,
it's just true.
It did.
Like, pardon my French, but it won those games.
Right.
I screwed over Jund.
Yep.
And I screwed over any deck that was playing Saga. To just keep those people off their colors.
Right.
is massive.
It is.
Now, I play 3 in the main, but you see a lot of people play 4 because of where
Right.
the meta's at. All those dual lands and the triomes, and with 4 color being on top,
Exactly.
slapping the spreading seas on those triomes feels really good.
Right.
Really good.
Right.
You know,
Unless
someone
you're on the receiving end.
instep, like you're on the play, you play your fetch land, pass, they play their fetch land, pass, you fetch, and you know, you play your second land, you pass, and then you know, whatever. You slap a spreading seas on their triome, they're not gonna like that. They just aren't gonna like that.
Right.
And you draw a card off of it.
And,
If the draw a card engine wasn't there, it wouldn't be nearly as good. But to be able to just simply draw a card off of doing it is really beneficial. It's a straight cycle effect, and you're stopping your opponent from being on the colors that they need.
Sure.
Especially the 4 color decks. Like the 4 color deck is really where it hits the hardest. But even if you're playing against Jund or Grixis Shadow, the 3 color decks.
3 colors hard in that to get colored up in everything that you need as quickly as you need to in the modern meta now. So you pop one of those lands, you're hurting.
Yeah.
Like
you just are.
If you're on that side of it, you know.
Even with Prismatic Ending into Teferi being in here, like to cast a Teferi to bounce a Spreading Seas,
right?
You're not really doing anything. You're drawing a card, and now they can only cast at sorcery speed. But what have you done? Like you have wasted a bounce on something that you just don't want to bounce.
Right.
So like that's a solid trade. Even if I'm a control player and you slap a Teferi and I'm not countering it, if I don't have the counter, I'm fine with you bouncing the Spreading Seas.
Yeah,
I'll just cast it again, and I'll draw another card. And you know what I'll do? I'll probably Prismatic Ending your Teferi.
Right.
And I'll cast my own. And like at that point, you have wasted a solid resource for a bounce effect for nothing.
Right.
And if that is your answer as a 4 color deck to be able to get rid of that, that's not good. The best answer you're going to have is Prismatic Ending, and more than likely, your only white source was the Triome that you just fetched.
Exactly.
So you're going to be off of white for a while.
One you want to go after anyway.
Yeah. So
Spreading Seas, you want to try to go after that just in case they had the way to do, you know.
Yeah, because normally after that, you'll see them, you know, start fetching up like a stomping ground to play Run and 6 or a breeding pool. Or maybe another Triumph if they don't have anything to do in the early game.
Sure.
But that's really just to start manifesting for Omnath in the late game.
Yeah.
Past blue-white control, clearly what we've been talking about, you've got 4 color control.
Yes.
And everybody knows 4 color control is easily right at the top of the meta below Hammer and Grixis Shadow.
Right.
Grixis Shadow. Grixis Shadow is actually at the top, but 4 color is actually right below it. I misread it whenever I talked about it earlier. Hammer is actually number 3 at 7%, but 4 color is 9%. It's right up there with Grixis Shadow, but Shadow is just still right above it. But 4 color control arguably is the best deck in the format at the moment, and it's only because of everything that you can do with it.
Yes.
You know, Run and 6, looping the lands. You have the cycle off of the Triomes if you want to leave it in hand.
Yeah.
Cycle it, buy it back with friend. You're drawing a card, maybe on the end step of your opponent's turn. And once you get to the point, if you ult it, you can just discard a land and loop Ephemerate and just really punish your opponents.
Right. Right.
And that's really not good.
No, that's not.
If
If
you leave that deck unchecked, once they slap an Omnath and you have no solid answer to it, they're just going to start storming off with their fetch lands, gaining more mana, and they're just going to do some crazy, crazy things.
Right. Well, it gets so explosive, and it can get explosive really quickly.
It can.
To where it doesn't really matter what you do. I mean, it really doesn't matter what you do. Like if you let it get Lord, what, turn 3 unchecked, or even lightly checked. Say you you give them, right. You give them that little, like that. No, they're still gonna be. But
you can't pump fake them.
No, you can't.
You cannot afford to pump fake or even bluff.
Yeah,
you have to show them that you have the answer.
You do,
because if you don't, you will lose.
Right.
Through and through. The game with 4 color control is normally decided by the 5th turn, in my opinion.
Sure.
The 5th turn, because at that point they're starting to cast. They're starting to hard cast because they can mana fix so well.
Oh my god.
They're starting to hard cast Fury and they're starting to hard cast Solitude. And if you get to that point in the game, if it's just a simple 4 color control versus blue-white control, 4-color control is normally going to take that game.
Yes.
Normally, I don't want to say always because it can go the other way, but it just depends on the opening hands. There's a lot of determining factors.
It's wider.
But to sit across from that deck and to leave it unchecked until the 5th turn, you're not coming back.
Right.
You're just not. The amount of value they get from that by slapping an Eternal Witness to buy back their Ephemerate.
Exactly.
After they've already invoked Solitude, Ephemerated, and now Ephemerate's going to rebound, and they will Ephemerate again and exile 3 of your creatures in total.
Yes.
Now they're just going to play Eternal Witness, buy it back, and they're going to continue to loop it because, for those who don't know, after the rebound trigger and you Ephemerate Eternal Witness, Ephemerate's already resolved. It goes back to grave.
It goes back to grave.
Now, if it were to permanently go to exile, this wouldn't be nearly as bad.
Exactly.
But Eternal Witness can buy it back.
For another.
So you buy it back, and now you have that value train, and it's not stopping. The value train doesn't stop.
No.
Until you physically stand in front of it and you hold it.
Right.
You have to grab it by the locomotive.
Yes.
And look it dead in the face.
Both of them.
And say, "You're not moving."
Right. Exactly.
So I don't think much else can be said outside of that. Really, it's got Yorion, so it's got that 8th card right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly.
We've already talked about that being a benefit.
Yeah.
Having that 8th card, because more than likely you're keeping your opening 7 with 4-color. It's so versatile. You have so many things you can do. It's 80 cards. It's very resistant to mill, which isn't really around anyway. But if you ever do sit across from it, which I saw at a 1K very recently, and it was very miserable to watch, and I wasn't even playing.
Right.
And, just with Yorion being in there, and just, Yorion by itself really isn't that great. But if you get to the point where you get to cast it, and you're, exiling Omnath, exiling maybe Fury, and you just bring him, or Abundant Growth, because I forgot Abundant Growth is in there.
Right.
You're exiling your Abundant Growth, so ETB, attach them, draw more cards, draw a card off Omnath, deal 4 damage with Fury, and in any number of areas that isn't a player.
Right.
And
then the amount of mana that you would have at that point.
Yeah, it's
just
it's kind of crazy. It's a bit much, but that's the name of the game. That's where we're at.
It is.
So, anything you want to say about control before we move on to combo?
No, I always enjoy control on that front too. But yeah, it's pretty much. I mean, the 4-color control is definitely new, but yeah, I mean, blue white's kind of stayed in that same realm. 4-color control, man, it's a thing. It's silly.
Oh, there was actually something I did want to add. I wrote a note here. So a card that you might expect to come up with Boseiju being printed and these channel effects really starting to come in, you might see Trick Bind enter. For those who don't know, it's 1 blue and 1 colorless.
Okay.
Counter target activated or triggered ability.
Yes.
And it has split second.
Yes.
Split second is what makes it big.
Big deal.
So you aren't going to be able to counter it, with the spell from your hand. You're going to have to find another way to deal with that. So I wouldn't see it happen a lot, but I could easily see blue-white adjusting if Boseiju became problematic, or if more activated or triggered abilities entered the meta. Trick Bind would definitely be a good go-to card for blue-white to start picking up, in my opinion.
Sure.
So I wrote that down to share. I don't know if you agree, but
I do for sure. That Boseiju, I'm kind of waiting to see where that falls out. It's got the value.
Yeah, it's really good.
It is.
A lot of people are going to try it, and I think they're going to shift away from it because I don't think it's as good as what people think it is.
Right.
You might see it played as a 1-of or a 2-of in decks that are trying to really be Ponza, but you might see Ponza kind of reemerge and play 4 copies of it. Outside of that, you're not going to see people play 4 copies.
I can't imagine.
With it being legendary,
right.
Yeah, you're destroying land, but it's a solid 1-for-1 trade. It's no different than Pillage.
Yeah.
It's no different than Stone Rain. You're just casting something and you're destroying land.
Right.
In this case, it's a channel effect. You're just discarding it to destroy something. But this one's a little bit more versatile and it can target artifacts and enchantments.
Yes.
So you might see it sideboarded. You really might see that.
I would see that more sideboarded.
So they might mainboard 1. Like Jund would probably be a good home for Boseiju because to deal with Chalice on 1.
Right.
As a Loris Jund, it's big.
Yeah.
So to just be able to, cycle that
and
destroy Chalice, it's not going to counter it.
Sure.
It's just Yeah, you just
Yeah.
discard it.
It just
Bam.
gets discarded.
You know,
Yeah.
it does. It uses
And
the
in all,
tag.
when I saw it, if I saw it going in modern, honestly, I was talking to somebody else in the shop too when that was even when it was spoiled, because they were kind of saying, yeah, I really like that for commander, but I don't know where else that would fall. And one of the first places that I went with that was Chalice. Like Chalice is really really rough,
Mhm.
and
Well, but Jones has also struggled against enchantments for a long
it
time,
has.
and
Yeah.
this is easy enchantment removal.
Well, because it doesn't have the color it needs for enchantment
Mhm.
removal.
Well, the only solid enchantment removal that it's had has just been green removal, and you really don't want to have to do that because you're not
No.
really doing a lot of green stuff. You're primarily black red with a splash of green for Goyf and Renaissance.
Right.
That's how it's been for the last couple of years.
And a braid falling out as well.
Yeah, well, I guess there
Braid
was
used to
there was
be-
Blood Braid Elf as well,
Right.
but it's been so long ago since you've even seen Blood
Boy,
Braid Elf
Blood
played.
Braid.
So, anyway,
Sorry.
so moving on from control to combo, I think these are to be expected, and I think the only one that maybe wasn't expected was the last one I have on the list.
Yep.
Starting with the top, we got Hammer.
Of course.
It's a solid turn 2, turn 3 kill, and not much else needs to be said.
Right.
It's plain Luras. It's got Siddhartha's Aid, cast equipment at instant speed, Stoneforge Mystic, and like we talked about earlier, it's plain Dark Confidant. Some lists are.
Right.
Most lists that you're going to play against are either green white or black white. So it's either Selesnya or Swordsov.
Right.
Outside of that, you're really not seeing a lot of other decks that Hammer's being put in. There's the Boros deck that Aspiring Spike came out with that people are playing, but it's nowhere near the level that Hammer's been at. Hammer's consistently been at the top for 6 months, and it hasn't gone down because you just have to respect the fact that it can kill you at any time. It's so much different than Infect because it's been compared to Infect. It's so much different because it's at any point in the game.
Right.
Infect creatures are so easy to kill.
Yes. Yes.
Those have the Cheerio creatures, Memnite and Ornithopter, and then you're playing Stoneforge Mystic, and you're playing Pure Steel Paladin, and you have Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah.
You have to respect the fact that it can kill you.
Yes. Oh, 100%.
And here's the crazy part about it. There's 2 Siddhartha's Aids on the field. You get 2 triggers whenever you do, and you have 2 creatures. You better have 2 removal spells.
You better.
Because you're losing if you don't.
Yeah.
Because you cast the hammer, okay, trigger 1, trigger 2.
Right.
This trigger goes to this creature, this trigger goes to this creature.
Yeah.
Okay, ETB, trigger. I'm going to kill that one. Okay, trigger here.
Exactly.
I can't kill that one.
Right.
And that's a problem. That's why hammer is just like, you have to respect the fact that it can kill you at any time.
Right.
And if you don't keep that deck in check, you're just going to have a bad time. Now, hammer is very versatile in the sense that it's got prismatic ending and Thoughtseize on the side.
Yeah.
So Chalice with the Void really isn't the best answer.
No.
It's not. It's a good answer. It's good, but it's not the best answer.
It's not the best.
It's just not going to be the best answer. If you play a Chalice on 1, it's going to slow them down, and they may be afraid of it, especially in the first game. Because they're not going to have that distraction.
Right, they don't have to.
But
then,
they're going to Chalice check you, and if you let that go, then you lose anyway.
Right.
But in the second, third game, they kind of have the upper hand because they have Thoughtseize, and they've got Prismatic Ending, and they've got Sanctifier and Beck, and they still get to keep.
Right.
They still get to keep Loris as a companion. It's not going away. So, but the reason why Bob is so good in Hammer is because most times you reveal a card, you're losing 0 or 1 life.
Exactly.
And you're not losing. I mean, you might lose 2, but that's it. You're not losing anything else. So, and you need to draw cards. It's playing, 3 or 4 copies of Silent Clearing to draw more cards.
Yep.
And that's its only form of card draw. I played Esper Sentinel, but Esper Sentinel's normally dying. And you might draw 1 card off of it, and that's not going to suffice.
No.
A deck that isn't playing blue needs to find a way to effectively be able to keep the gas up, to keep up with the decks that are playing blue. And Hammer has successfully done that for a long time. Playing Esper Sentinel, keeping those combo decks in check. Okay, I'm drawing a card now. Okay, I'm drawing 2 cards now because you have 2 on the board.
Right.
You got Silent Clearing. Okay, in step, I'm going to draw an extra card. I have Bob. I'll reveal this. It's a land. Cool. Didn't need that. And then I'll draw my card. It's a hammer. Wow, I needed that.
Neato.
So Bob being in there, that's really neat to see. And I'm glad that Hammer's still at the top. I really enjoy the deck, and it really sucks playing against it. But it always keeps you on your toes, especially as a control player. It reminds me, don't get aggressive yet.
Yeah.
Don't get aggressive yet.
Exactly.
Because control is meant to be a very responsive deck, and even decks that aren't responsive are forced to be responsive because of Hammer.
For sure.
So
well, and Hammer is so check raise.
Yeah.
Like you have to. That's why you have to be so careful with it because you decide to go aggressive with it, and they will check you and raise every time. Like they have that ability. If they have dudes on the field, at any time, you could be in pain.
Yep.
But so yeah, Hammer is what it is. But looks like what we got Amulet.
We got Amulet Titan at 5%. It's the second one. It's number 2 on the combo list. Something that I've seen them start playing is Turn Timber Symbiosis. I believe it was the Mythic from Zendikar Rising. That's the flip.
It was.
It says look at the top 7 and put a creature onto the battlefield.
Right.
So some decks started playing Cultivator Colossus because it was another option to start cycling through lands from your deck.
Sure.
But they have found that why do that when you could just still pay 7 and get the Titan?
That's right.
So you pay 7, get the Titan. Now you're searching, you're getting 2 lands, and you probably have the Amulet on the field already. So you get your Porous Garrison and your Slayer Stronghold.
Yeah.
And you untap, you give it haste, and you swing in. You get 2 more lands. Now you get your Double Strike land. You're dealing 16 damage. And if you've got your Dryad on the field already, game's over because you're probably grabbing Valakut.
Sure.
So the deck is still consistently, even after all these years, is still at the top.
Right.
A year and a half ago, Amulet was running wild.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't even close.
Oh, I heard people screaming bans on that.
Top 8s and top 16s. Like looking at those, there were multiple copies of Amulet in every single one of them, and people were calling for a ban of Amulet Vigor. But the thing is if you ban Amulet Vigor, it kills the deck, and the deck's been around for a long time.
You got it.
It's clearly still been kept in check long enough to where new stuff gets printed, you can see that it's gone down. So I'm glad they didn't make that jump. I really give Wizards props to that for not making that jump too early like they have on some cards.
Well, if it would have been blue, they would have.
Probably.
Sorry, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad to see it's still around. It's one of the very few times that they didn't bend the knee to the Rage Mob. And I think I think it was well placed because as you can see, it's not top of meta now. New stuff came out. New stuff came out, and they kind of gave it its check as well. So.
Yeah, well, okay. So the reason why after MH2 people thought the Amulet was going to be insane because it was already running wild was Urza Saga, because they're like, now you have 8 amulets. Yeah, but no. So whenever it came out, Amulet was still placing consistently at the top because people were still adjusting to the meta.
Still adjusting.
And it was really, really gross to see people play Urza Saga in the deck because now they're consistently getting the amulets.
Sure.
But now people have just found solid ways to deal with Urza Saga, like Alpine Moon, and you don't have to worry about it. Right. So if your opponent plays Urza Saga on the first turn, you can assume that they're probably Amulet Titan since they don't have a companion.
Right.
And if it's game 2, it's their fault for playing the Saga. Alpine Moon.
Yes.
See.
Right. Right. Well, and that's what brought Alpine Moon exploded at that point. I remember before Modern Horizons 2 even got printed, they had just spoiled it. That people were screaming for a banner as a Saga. That's the most broken thing on the face of the earth. And blah 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 blah.
The great part about it.
So yeah, is it good? Is it helpful? Yes, it is. But give the card some time. Give the card some time. Sideboards will be adjusted. Things will be done. Mm-hmm. Things will be handled. I never believed that card was card was quite bad enough.
The best thing about Urza Saga, the biggest setback to it is the fact that it uses the stack.
Sure.
So when it enters, in response to it being able to tap for mana, you can destroy it.
You can destroy it. Correct.
And they don't get any value out of it. They've already played their land.
Yes.
And what are they supposed to do?
Right.
They're just set back to land now, and they don't even get to profit the tap out of it.
Nope.
So, with it being an enchantment, that was really the important thing. If they would have just done a land saga, it would have been so much different. But the fact that it's an
would've.
enchantment, they made it targetable
Yes.
for enchantment removal with this instant speed, which was the right thing to do. So, and
It
the
was.
fact that it uses the stack, that's very important.
Right.
So, and I like that they made it to where you can only search for 0 or 1, not just a 0 or 1 DMZ.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Right.
that would be so much worse. But they did this one right. I really think that Urza Saga is perfectly fine. I cannot imagine that it's going to get banned anytime soon.
Right. Right.
The only way that it would get banned anytime soon is if like another 0-drop artifact gets printed, which I don't envision happening for the power level of standard, that is just insanely powerful, or even a 1-drop artifact.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what they would print that would cause that to, but I guess that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, who knows what they're going to do, but yeah.
But moving on
as it
from
sits currently,
yeah,
there's no.
I mean, that's true.
I don't believe there's any reason.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Moving on from Amulet, though, we've got Living End sitting at 3%. We were talking about Crashcade. Living End is only at 3%, probably because it's so easy to answer.
It is.
Just all the cycling effects
can go off.
Yeah, it's more of a class cannon. It's like
it is.
It's more comparable to the ones of Tomorrow deck, where you're trying to get Omniscience and the large Eldrazi Titans on the field.
Right.
And if it happens, it's great.
Yeah.
It feels wonderful.
It does.
It just feels insanely good. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's just like with every other deck, I guess. But this is trying to capitalize on the Cascade off Plowing Outburst and Chartle's Agent, and you're hitting Living End. The best thing about Chartle's Agent is that it's Cascade, so the Chartle's Agent still enters. So you're just cycling from your hand, and then filling your graveyard, Living in, make a board, swing in. Right. Very simple. It's a very clear strategy. Your opponent knows what you're doing. You make it very well known once you cycle Street Wraith, because nobody's cycling Street Wraith anymore.
Yes.
Because, as we see, Grixis Shadow doesn't need it.
It doesn't need it.
Like, Shadow players don't need Street Wraith anymore. So if someone cycles Street Wraith and they have no companion, unless they're just playing old style Death Shadow, you just need to assume they're playing Living End.
Right.
Because,
well, and that's kind of the problem with like those linear type decks like that. If you literally have one avenue to go, this is the way that I'm going. If you can disrupt that, GG.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, but it's fun. I like to see that it's actually like in the meta at all, but it is kind of one of those fun things. But it's super class game.
Yeah, and that's why it's sitting lower, as where Hammer and Amulet are sitting higher, because even whenever you disrupt one strategy, it's not over.
Right.
But with Living End, like you said, it's one and done. You deal with it, it's probably over.
Right.
Like,
I mean, not that it's absolutely, but
normally no. But they are playing copies of Force Negation, so if you have sorcery speed stuff like Rest in Peace or Sanctifier and Vec.
Right.
Well, Sanctifier can be countered by Force Negation, but they can just Brazen Borrow it.
Right.
And,
right.
Cool. Now you don't have it. Now I can cycle one, go off.
Right. Right.
But if you have Rest in Peace, they can still Brazen Borrow that, but they can Force Negation that. So Force Negation being in that list is definitely necessary, and it's allowed the deck to stay consistently at, I would say, probably tier 2 or tier 3 in the meta. It's never been tier 1.
Yeah.
It is something that you will see show up in a top 8. It might win one on occasion,
right?
But it's never consistently getting first or second place.
Right.
It's never getting it. I wouldn't say it's never getting top 4. You generally see it 5th through 8th, or maybe a little bit below that.
Right.
Which, moving on from Living End, brings us to the last deck on the list.
Buddy.
Good old classic Dredge.
Yeah.
It's sitting at 2%. They did just recently get a new card, so they've kind of shifted their colors to play a little bit more blue. They're playing Otherworldly Gaze. When I saw that card, I was thinking, that would be really good for Jeskai Phoenix, but at the time, I didn't think the Dredge would accommodate to that. But they have.
Right.
So, and it's got flashback, 1 blue, 1 colorless. You put look at the top 3, you can put any number into your graveyard and leave any number on top.
Yeah.
In any order. So it's essentially a surveil effect, but it's not.
Right.
It's weird. It doesn't say surveil, but that's just kind of where we're at. But you're looking at the top 3, put any number in your grave, and normally you're putting all 3 in the grave.
Sure.
It's just.
But it does give you the option.
Like if you turn 1 Otherworldly Gaze and you find 2 prize amalgams and an Archimedes.
Oh my dear God.
Like that's pretty good. Or if you find 3 creeping chills, best case scenario, that's
Right.
really
That's
good.
really good.
Or if you find a couple
Yeah.
dredgers, now you set yourself up for a turn 3 cathartic reunion or throwing discovery.
Exactly.
Throwing discovery, Strixhaven's another cathartic reunion.
Yeah.
Except you don't discard on cast. That one, I believe. I think that's how that one goes. So you don't discard on cast. You cast it.
You cast
You
it. and
discard
then
2,
discard
draw
2.
3, and you gain 3 life.
Correct.
So
right.
It's definitely has become an upgrade. Dredge have got some upgrades over the last couple of years. Theros Beyond Death, they got Ox of Agonis. But I mean, you still have all the simple dredge creatures, with the exception of Golgari Grave Troll, rest in peace.
Yeah.
But it needed to go, you know, and we'll get to that here shortly.
Get to that.
So yeah, it's nice to see Dredge is still sitting at 2%. It's the number 4 combo deck in the meta. You can't sleep on it, even after all this time, all the graveyard hate. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Everybody's working on the graveyard right now. So
yeah,
you got to expect Dredge to kind of capitalize on that. Everyone's working out of the graveyard. You're probably not playing Leyline of the Void.
Right.
You're playing something very simple like Dalvy Voidwalker that I can deal with.
Right.
You know, you're playing something like Rest in Peace that I can deal with. You're playing something like Sanctifier and Beck that I can deal with. You know, there's a lot of things that they can deal with effectively that isn't stopping everything from happening.
Sure.
So even after all this time, it's nice to see Dredge is still at 2%. Do you have anything else you want to add before we get to the Vandals?
Well, and even on that front, like I said before, I mean, there's fanboys of the Amulet Titan that's been around forever. There was kind of fanboys of Shadow who have kind of kept that around and things like that. And Dredge is absolutely no different. Like there are guys who have been playing with Dredge since Dredge existed, and they will not let it. They will not let it go.
They won't let it go.
Trying cards.
Whereas like even
Dredge is like one of the most hated mechanics by the man who created the game.
Yeah, well, even like with Dredge still being around, it's like people won't let it go. Storm's still around, but it's nowhere near as hot.
Right.
Like if you sit across from somebody who's playing Storm, you've seen it. You know what it can do. You're not really afraid. You know what they're about to do, and you can deal with it. And with all the graveyard hate that's going on, like that just feels really bad for them because they have to be able to buy back from the graveyard normally to be able to kill you in one turn with Great
Sure, exactly.
And if they can't effectively do that, Storm is nowhere near as versatile, in my opinion, as what Dredge has been over the years, being able to consistently get out of situations it shouldn't be able to get out of.
Right.
Whereas Storm really struggles because if they can't combo off, they're not going to win.
Right.
Dredge can just, a couple dredges a turn, or maybe one dredge in a turn, and the game's changed.
Back in the game.
It has changed.
Yeah.
It has effectively changed.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Unless you have the graveyard hate. That deck is going to do its thing, and like we said, you have to grab it by the locomotive and tell it you ain't moving.
Both wheels.
So it's like watching a train run through a semi. It's just You think you're big enough to stop it, and you're just not. So
all right.